Coming off the second biggest game of his career, DeAndre Hopkins is all the way up to WR2 status on the season. Forever, and if he had a quarterback receiver, Hopkins finally has a quarterback, and the results have been predictably dominant. That Hopkins' 82,241 explosion came in Seattle speaks to the increasing dynamism of Deshaun Watson and the Texans' offense. If Hopkins did that to the Legion of Boom, what might he have in store for the Colts? Chuck Pagano's defense is getting blasted for the league's most yards per attempt and unseemingly 8.9, second most weekly passing yards 290 and fifth most receiver fantasy points. Hopkins has probably already had his game of the year, but no one has a better Week 9 setup, and few have a better going-forward outlook. Week 9 quarterbacks QB notes: Deshaun Watson is averaging 28.6 fantasy points, which, if it holds, would be the most since Peyton Manning's mind-boggling 31.0 in 2013. That average should only go up against the Colts, who are allowing the fifth most quarterback fantasy points and 290 weekly passing yards. Russell Wilson is posting a weekly 31.3 since the Seahawks offense got out of neutral in Week 3. The Redskins are an attackable home matchup. It took a monsoon to slow down Dak Prescott. Last week's rain-soaked rout of the Redskins should be stricken from the record. Prescott has a pristine Week 9 home matchup in the shootout-prone Chiefs. Drew Brees is just the QB 10 by average fantasy points, but is up to fourth in weekly yardage 279. His 4.4 touchdown percentage should keep regressing closer to his 5.3 career mean. Allowing the third most weekly passing yards, the Bucs are a cakewalk home matchup. Alex Smith is the QB 4 by average points. In Week 9, the days are strange. The Cowboys aren't going to be the straw to break the hot starts back in a game with an over-under of 51. The Broncos won't be rolling out the red carpet for Carson Wentz, but are no longer a top 5 pass defense by yards, touchdowns or fantasy points surrendered. Wentz is averaging 3 touchdowns per game at home. With 6 teams on bye, the QB 3 by average points remains worthy of a high-end QB 1 ranking. Cam Newton's season of peaks and valleys is currently mired in a 3-game slump. You could easily argue this is Newton's new normal. Now the Panthers have traded away his number 1 receiver. Either way, Newton is the QB 8 by average points, and averaging 10.55 as a rusher during his recent 3-game skid. That's why he's remained the QB 12 over the past 3 weeks, even as his real-life play has sputtered. The Falcons are not a stay-away matchup, coming off the most Matthew Stafford game imaginable, 423 yards, 0 touchdowns. The sidearmed samurai is headed on the road to Green Bay. Stafford roughed up for the Pack for 732 yards and 5 touchdowns across their 2 2016 matchups. If there's a concern, it's that the Brett Hundley Cheeseheads won't keep the game close enough for Stafford to rack up volume. Editor's note: want to know who is a must-play in your lineups this week? You're in luck. Every week, the experts at RotoGrinders answer a handful of questions to help you make crucial lineup-building decisions. Start a free 7-day trial today. The problem with every Golden Tyrod Taylor spot: he doesn't have any weapons. That finally sort of changed this week with the Bills' stunning acquisition of Kelvin Benjamin. Now, if you're hardcore enough of a fantasy player to be reading rankings columns, you know Benjamin won't be any sort of a magic bullet. He will be an asset, not just because he's a number 1 receiver providing a 6'5" target in the red zone, but because he'll take pressure off Jordan Matthews and Zay Jones. Matthews can spend closer to 100% of his time in the slot. It's currently 60.8 per PFF, while Jones can avoid immediate jams off the line of scrimmage as he transitions from X to Z receiver. For Week 9, Taylor has yet another exploitable matchup in a Jets defense that's allowed the league's most passing touchdown 17, the QB 18 by average points. Derek Carr is a disappointing 22nd in yards per attempt, 6.89. He's sandwiched between Case Keenum and Matthew Stafford. Even extreme volume the past 3 games, 44 average attempts, has produced just QB 7 numbers. For Week 9, he'll be looking to take advantage of the Dolphins' defense getting smacked for a 103.1 QB rating against. We did it, fam. Matt Ryan finally had his first multi-touchdown start since September, ripping the Jets for 2 scores. Like Drew Brees, Ryan's crater-low 3.9 touchdown percentage will hopefully regress closer to his 4.7 career average. Marcus Mariota has been one of this year's most inscrutable quarterbacks. He's thrown for shockingly few touchdowns, though he's boosted his numbers with 3 scores on the ground. Of course, 0 of those have come since his Week 4 hamstring injury. Coming off the Titans' bye, Mariota should be at something close to full health against the Ravens' stingy pass defense. Even after getting dismantled by Deshaun Watson last week, the Seahawks have allowed just 9 passing touchdowns in 7 games. With his offensive line banged up and his receiver core unsettled, Kirk Cousins will be a fringe QB1 on the road, coming off his first touchdown effort in 5 weeks. Jacoby Brissett has a nice matchup in a Texans defense that just isn't the same after injury took a sledgehammer to its starting 11. Allowing the third most quarterback fantasy points, the Texans are also coughing up over 6 yards per carry to signal callers. Brissett is streamable with 6 QBs on bye. Jameis Winston was hysterically bad in Week 8. It was supposedly related to his shoulder injury, though Winston was struggling long before tweaking his AC joint. Even with 4 300-yard games in 7 appearances, Winston hasn't shown enough to be trusted as a weekly QB1. Josh McCown has managed at least 2 scores in 4 straight starts. Although they don't break against the pass, the Bills do plenty of bending. The QB19 by average points, Jared Goff has just 2 total touchdowns over his past 3 starts. He gets the streamer benefit of the doubt for Week 9 because he's coming off bye against a Giants team in disarray. Number 1 CB Janoris Jenkins will be serving a team-imposed suspension. The G-Men's formerly imposing defense is allowing the 7th most quarterback fantasy points. Brett Hundley was unspeakably bad in his first career start. Thankfully, it came at the right time, as the Packers had their bye week to try to construct a more Hundley-centric game plan. Even after his Week 7 faceplant, Hundley's dual-threat ability keeps him on the streamer radar. 1926 is a sorry state of affairs. None of Andy Dalton, Jay Cutler, Joe Flacco, Blake Bortles, Brock Osweiler, Eli Manning, Drew Stanton or CJ Beathard have a discernible ceiling. Don't forget, for the latest on everything NFL, check out RotoWorld's player news, or follow at RotoWorld FB or at RotoPad on Twitter. Week 9 running backs rank player name opponent notes 1 Kareem Hunt at All 2 Todd Gurley at NYG 3 LaShawn McCoy at NYJ 4 Leonard Fournette vs. Sin 5 Mark Ingram vs. TB6 Lamar Miller vs. Ind 7 Doug Martin at number 8 Devonta Freeman at Car questionable shoulder 9 Aaron Jones vs. DET 10 Adrian Peterson at SF 11 Alvin Kamara vs. TB 12 DeMarco Murray vs. Val 13 Carlos Hyde vs. ARZ 14 Chris Thompson at C 15 Alex Collins at 10 16 Joe Mixon at Jack 17 Amir Abdullah at GB 18 Alfred Morris vs. KC 19 Tevin Coleman at Car 20 Jay Ajayi vs. Den 21 Christian McCaffrey vs. ATL 22 CJ Anderson at Phi 23 Bilal Powell vs. BUF 24 Marshawn Lynch at Mia 25 Kenyon Drake vs. O 26 Buck Allen at 10-27 Frank Gore at How 28 Orleans Darkwa vs. Lar 29 Jonathan Stewart vs. ATL 30 Matt Forte vs. BUF 31 Derrick Henry vs. Val 32 Marlon Mack at How 33 Darren McFadden vs. KC 34 LeGarrette Blunt vs. Den 35 Damian Williams vs. Oak 36 Rob Kelly at C questionable ankle 37 Ty Montgomery vs. DET 38 Jalen Richard at Mia 39 Thomas Rawls vs. Was 40 Wayne Gallman vs. Lar 41 TJ Yeldon vs. Sin 42 Matt Breida vs. ARZ questionable knee 43 Theo Riddick at GB 44 Jamal Charles at 545 Andre Ellington at SF questionable quadriceps 46 Devontae Booker at 547 Don't DeForeman vs. Ind 48 Eddie Lacy vs. Was 49 JD McKissick vs. Was 50 Rod Smith vs. KC 51 Chris Ivory vs. Sin 52 Shane Vereen vs. Lar 53 Mike Tolbert at NYJ 54 Dwayne Washington at GB sidelined quadriceps RB notes Week 8 was good news bad news for Kareem Hunt, who was held below 100 yards from scrimmage for the first time as an NFL ER, but notched his second most carries 22. That he was shut down by the Broncos' elite run defense is not a total surprise. The Cowboys' 4.49 YPC are more forgiving. Todd Gurley has just 2 touchdowns over his past 4 games after scoring 7 in his first 3. Even with that expected regression, he's remained the RB6 by average points since his scoring binge ended. He's here to stay under coach Sean McVay. LeSean McCoy has 295 yards from scrimmage over his past 2 games after averaging 94 in weeks 15. allowing 128 rushing yards per game and the 8th most running back fantasy points. The Jets will not be slowing Shady down. Leonard Fournette piled up 310 yards rushing in weeks 5 and 6 before injuring his ankle. With 2 weeks to heal up, he's practicing in full for Week 9. The Bengals don't pop as a matchup, but matchups have not mattered for Jacksonville's dynamic rookie. Admonished for and humbled by his 2 Week 8 fumbles, Mark Ingram will try to bounce back against the Bucs' hollowed-out defense. Ingram is averaging a mammoth 27 touches in 3 games since Adrian Peterson's departure, finding the end zone each week. Lamar Miller has finished as an RB1 just twice all season. He's the RB6 because 6 teams are on bye. He's averaging 20 touches, and the Colts are hemorrhaging the 3rd most running back fantasy points. Like Miller, Doug Martin is seeing consistently big workloads, averaging over 20 touches the past 2 weeks. With Jameis Winston struggling and ailing shoulder, Martin could be the Bucs' main means of moving the ball against a Saints defense coughing up nearly 5 yards per carry. Devonta Freeman has been held scoreless over his past 3 games, a time frame in which he's averaged an inexcusably low 11 carries. Now he's battling a stinger. One of the league's best backs, Freeman is a weekly threat to go off, but considering his setup against a Panthers defense allowing the 3rd fewest running back fantasy points, his blow-up odds will be lower than usual. Aaron Jones played 44 of 55 snaps in the Packers' first game without Aaron Rodgers. He managed to turn in a 171,311 rushing line even as Brett Hundley presented zero passing threat. Hundley's play is a concern, though the Packers had the bye week to adjust their scheme. The Lions are not a foreboding matchup. Even with Jones' early down takeover, Ty Montgomery should see more than the 5 touches he received against the Saints. The Pack need to lean on their backfield in Rodgers' absence. Adrian Peterson's Cardinals' career has been one sensational game and one awful one. Week 9 should be somewhere in the middle. Although Drew Stanton threatens to torpedo the entire offense, arrested Peterson is set up for success coming off the Cardinals' bye. Peterson should be the focal point of the attack, and no team is allowing more fantasy points to enemy runners than the 49ers. Even with Mark Ingram's Week 8 butterfingers, Alvin Kamara's role should change. The Saints have had a perfect thing going with their post-Adrian Peterson equilibrium. The Titans' backfield has proven to be a bit of a forecasting nightmare, but coach Mike Mularkey's commitment to limping DeMarco Murray has remained clear. With the bye week to rest his balky hamstring, Murray should be as healthy as he's been since Week 1. The Cardinals' run defense has remained solid, but with Carson Palmer swapped out for Drew Stanton, game flow should remain in Carlos Hyde's favor. The Redskins' number 1 receiver, Chris Thompson, is averaging 7 weekly carries, leading the league with 5.97 yards per carry. Alex Collins has just about vanquished Buck Allen. Collins was simply sensational in Week 8. Joe Mixon has yet another plus matchup in a Jaguars D, permitting the league's most weekly rushing yards, 139. With Ezekiel Elliott appearing well and truly suspended this time, Alfred Morris, Darren McFadden and perhaps Rod Smith will finally form their long-expected committee. Active over McFadden all season, Morris will be the first man up, but the Cowboys have given every indication this will be a hot-hand situation. Getting the first crack is important, which is why Morris is ranked highest. But the order could be completely different in Week 10. Allowing 4.85 yards per carry and 131 yards per game, the Chiefs are a soft opponent. The Eagles have claimed LeGarrette Blount remains the starter following Jay Ajayi's acquisition. Perhaps that's what the gamebook will say, but Ajayi wasn't aggressively pursued to be a water boy. Most concerning for his Eagles debut is a matchup with the Broncos' elite run defense. The Panthers have said one of the reasons they traded Kelvin Benjamin was to spread out the field on offense. If true, it means Christian McCaffrey, who has been a shocking failure at creating his own space, might have some manufactured for him. McCaffrey has stayed in the RB2 mix in all formats thanks to his poor months Chris Thompson usage production. Similar to the Cowboys, the Dolphins' post-Jay Ajayi backfield will be a committee, where both Kenyon Drake and Damian Williams will get the opportunity to establish the hot hand. A more dynamic player who was previously serving as the number 2, Drake is the preferred own and Week 9 play. The question mark for Drake is his durability. Bilal Powell and Matt Forte are mostly drawing straws, with the trade deadline having come and gone, hence the need to showcase Frank Gore having come and gone. Marlon Mack could soon overtake his veteran backfield mate for good. Week 9 receivers rank player name opponent notes 1 DeAndre Hopkins vs. 2 Michael Thomas vs. TB3 Mike Evans at number 4 Julio Jones at car 5 Des Bryant vs. KC questionable knee 6, AJ Green at Jack 7, Michael Crabtree at MIA 8, Doug Baldwin vs. was 9, Will Fuller vs. Ein 10, Tyreek Hill at Doll 11, Amari Cooper at MIA 12, Golden Tate at GB questionable shoulder 13, Larry Fitzgerald at SF 14, Devin Funchess vs. ATL 15, Devontae Parker vs. Oak 16, Jordy Nelson vs. DET 17, T.Y. Hilton at Howe 18, Demarius Thomas at Phi 19, Jarvis Landry vs. Oak 20, Marvin Jones at GB 21, Kelvin Benjamin at NYJ 22, Alshon Jeffrey vs. Den 23, Ted Ginn vs. TB 24, Robbie Anderson vs. BUF questionable ankle 25, Sterling Shepard vs. LAR questionable ankle 26, Emmanuel Sanders at Phi questionable ankle 27, Pierre Garçon vs. ARZ questionable neck 28, Deshaun Jackson at number 29, Richard Matthews vs. Val 30, Mohamed Sanu at car 31, Paul Richardson vs. was 32, Tyler Lockett vs. was 33, Nelson Aguilar vs. Den 34, Devont Adams vs. DET 35, Marquise Lee vs. Sin questionable knee 36, Jeremy Maclin at 10 questionable shoulder 37, Robert Woods at NYG 38, Alan Hearns vs. Sin 39, Cooper Kupp at NYG 40, Kenny Stills vs. Oak 41, Jamison Crowder at C questionable hamstring 42, Sammy Watkins at NYG 43, Jermaine Kearse vs. BUF 44, Mike Wallace at 10:45, John Brown at SF 46, Randall Cobb vs. DET 47, Josh Doctson at C 48, Eric Decker vs. Val 49, Jordan Matthews at NYJ questionable thumb 50, Brandon Coleman vs. TB 51, Marquise Goodwin vs. ARZ 52, TJ Jones at GB 53, Corey Davis vs. Val questionable hamstring 54, Brandon LaFell at Jack questionable hamstring 55, Zay Jones at NYJ 56, Adam Humphries at no questionable ribs 57, Roger Lewis vs. LAR 58, Curtis Samuel vs. ATL 59, Dante Moncrief at Howe 60, Benny Fowler at Phi 61, Taylor Gabriel at Car 62, Terrell Pryor at C questionable ankle WR notes Mike Evans is the WR8 by average points even though he's yet to have a 100-yard game. It's well known that the Saints' defense has finally improved, but as Lord Reeves points out in his worksheet, they've still allowed 3 90-yard receiver performances over the past 3 weeks alone. Evans is overdue for a blow-up. Also overdue for a blow-up is Michael Thomas, who has cleared 75 yards in 5 of his past 6 games. The Bucs' bombed-out cornerback core is begging to be ripped. Julio Jones' 56 targets are tied for 21st. He's the WR19 by average points. Things are long past the breaking point. The Panthers, meanwhile, are not a damn breaking matchup, never mind the fact that they surrendered a 300-yard game to Jones last season. Owners simply have to keep trusting in Jones' elite WR1 ability. A Chiefs defense allowing the most receiver fantasy points set about retooling its secondary in Week 8, benching both Terrence Mitchell and Phillip Gaines. Neither played a snap against the Broncos. Perhaps in time the moves will pay dividends, but with Marcus Peters remaining stationary, nothing about Des Bryant's Week 9 matchup is daunting. The Jaguars are predictably no. 32 in receiver fantasy points allowed, but did allow useful days to DeAndre Hopkins 7,551 with Tom Savage starting and Antonio Brown 10,157. AJ Green is in that class. He should be fired up with confidence in season-long leagues. After scoring 9 and 8 touchdowns his first 2 years as a Raider, respectively, Michael Crabtree is on pace for 14. Tyler Lockett and Paul Richardson both blew up for 6,100 days against the Texans, but Doug Baldwin still led the Seahawks in targets 10. Baldwin's rate stats are right where they were for last year's WR10 finish. Everyone knows Will Fuller's touchdown rate will regress. Less talked about is his room to grow in every other category. He turned his Week 8 season highs in catches 5 and targets 8 into a career high in yards 125. The Colts are a mouth-watering matchup. Tyreek Hill is a good with the bad player. The numbers will be there in season long. In DFS, he's obviously a weekly tournament play. His upside is monstrous no matter the opponent, but he doesn't always offer floor. With the over-under set at 51 in Dallas, he should in Week 9. Amari Cooper has so far been the more harrowing version of Tyreek Hill. The Week 9 matchup is right in an already shaky Dolphins secondary that just lost its free safety, Nate Allen, to injured reserve playing through a shoulder injury. Golden Tate looked no worse for the wear against the Steelers, going 786. The Lions will be arrow-minded in Green Bay, already averaging 8.3 targets since Greg Olsen's injury. How much can Devin Funchess' target share actually increase in Kelvin Benjamin's absence? Perhaps Funchess gets pushed closer to 10 looks per game, but the biggest impact should be on his red zone usage. Both Funchess and Benjamin have a modest 6 targets inside the 20. With Benjamin off to Buffalo, Funchess is the only show in town, upping both his floor and ceiling. Larry Fitzgerald is going to badly miss Carson Palmer, but as Pro Football Focus Scott Barrett points out, if nothing else, Drew Stanton should lock onto his number 1 receiver. They won't be high quality, but the targets will keep coming. Jordy Nelson's first game without Aaron Rodgers was a 113 disaster. Not encouraging. Nevertheless, Nelson deserves more benefit of the doubt than one game. Devontae Parker's ankle is finally ready to return following his 3-game absence. Despite the Dolphins' up and downs, Parker has averaged 677 in his 3 healthy appearances. With the Dolphins in crisis mode, Parker should immediately retake the alpha role in the receiver corps. Chuck Pagano has proclaimed T.Y. Hilton's squeaky wheel needs some grease. The Texans' injury-ruined defense lathered it onto Tyler Lockett and Paul Richardson in Week 8. Demaryius Thomas managed an extremely disappointing 7,750 across Emmanuel Sanders' ankle 2 absences. Now Sanders is expected to return for Sunday's game in Philadelphia. Brock Osweiler will be under center. Although all feels lost for the Broncos, it's worth remembering neither Thomas nor Sanders went off the deep end when Osweiler made starts in 2015. Having surrendered the second most receiver receptions 106, the Eagles are also an attackable matchup, at least in the short term. Kelvin Benjamin's trade is a net negative. He had a hard enough time getting on the same page with Cam Newton. It will take time to build up chemistry with Tyrod Taylor. It is reasonable to expect the Bills to manufacture targets for a player they aggressively pursued. However, while Taylor is a slightly more accurate passer than Newton, at the very least, Benjamin should maintain WR3 status. WR30 by average points. Alshon Jeffrey has a stay-away matchup in the Broncos. The same can be said for boom-bust WR3 Nelson Agholor, who is probably headed for another quiet game. The fact that Agholor can have a nice fantasy day on only 12 catches keeps him in the top 36. Robbie Anderson's 16.1 yards per catch is 9th in the NFL. Returning from a 3-week absence, Sterling Shepard's ankle is now the Giants' number 1 receiver. Although he should spend more time on the outside than usual, slot man Shepard could see Jarvis Landry-type target totals for the wideout desperate G-men. Patrick Peterson and the death throes of C.J. Beathard don't mix for Pierre Garçon. Corey Davis' hamstring healthy return could eventually affect Richard Matthews. Week 9 is unlikely to be the eventually. Mohamed Sanu has averaged 560 in his 5 healthy appearances. He's not going away. Robert Woods leads the Rams in nearly every receiving category. I've decided the rankings should reflect as much. Jamison Crowder's unexpected breakout came with a hamstring injury. Even if he gets cleared, it's hard to envision a happy ending in Seattle. Week 9 tight ends rank player name opponent notes 1 Zach Ertz vs. Den 2 Travis Kelce at all 3 Evan Engram vs. Lar 4 Jimmy Graham vs. was questionable ankle 5 Cameron Braid at number 6 Jack Doyle at house 7 Austin Seferian-Jenkins vs. BUF 8 Delaney Walker vs. Bal questionable ankle 9 Jason Witten vs. KC 10 Jared Cook at Mia 11 Vernon Davis at C 12 Tyler Croft at Jack 13 Ed Dixon vs. ATL questionable ankle 14 Ryan Griffin vs. Ind 15 Austin Hooper at Car 16 Ben Watson at 10 questionable knee 17 Tyler Higbee at NYG 18 Nick Allery at NYJ 19 AJ Derby at 520 George Kittle vs. ARZ 21 Martellus Bennett vs. DET 22 OJ Howard at number 23 Julius Thomas vs. O 24 Eric Ebron at GB 25 Jonnu Smith vs. Bell 26 Mercedes Lewis vs. Sin 27 Darren Fells at GB 28 Kobe Fleener vs. TB 29 Nick Boyle at 10 notes in 8 games. Zach Ertz lowest finish is TE 9. That's rare consistency. For Week 9, he gets a Broncos defense silver plattering the second most tight end fantasy points. Travis Kelce's 533 yards actually lead the position after his 133-yard outburst against the Broncos. Kelce's 9 100-yard efforts since the beginning of last season are 5 more than any other tight end. Evan Engram has 11 catches for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns in 2 games since Odell Beckham's injury. Even with Sterling Shepard ankle returning, and Graham is the Giants' de facto number one receiver, Jimmy Graham has 4 touchdowns over his past 3 games, having allowed the most yards up the seam, 568, in only 7 games, no less. The Redskins are a plum matchup for Week 9. Cameron Brate has cleared 60 yards in each of his past 5 games, making him the TE5 by average points during that time span. Jack Doyle's 32 targets over the past 3 weeks are 6 more than the number 2, Rob Gronkowski. He's emerged as the primary safety valve for an under-siege Jacoby Brissett, allowing the 6th most tight end fantasy points. The Texans are a delightful matchup. Austin Seferian-Jenkins is averaging 5 catches per week, but his 6.5 yards per grab is by far the lowest for any qualified pass catcher excluding running backs. Even with 3 touchdowns, ASJ has been empty calories, allowing 11.5 yards per tight end reception. The Bills are a plus matchup. How will Corey Davis return affect Delanie Walker? It's an arbitrary sample size, but Walker is averaging just 37 yards since week 3. Derek Carr's clear-cut number 3 target. Jared Cook has drawn at least 5 targets in 7 of 8 games. He's averaging 6. Jason Witten is coming off a quiet Week 8 but has a golden goose matchup in a Chiefs team that's served up the 2nd most tight end yardage, 546. Jordan Reed is out for Week 9. Vernon Davis caught a season-high 5 passes in Reed's Week 3 absence, corralling his lone touchdown of 2017 in the process. Davis' 6 20-yard receptions are 3rd amongst tight ends even though he's just 26th in total tight end receptions. Tyler Kroft hasn't displayed much upside, but is averaging 441 since Tyler Eifert went down. He also has 3 touchdowns. He's a fine plug and play option as a TE2, with Kelvin Benjamin gone to Buffalo. Ed Dixon's TE2 case has been burnished. He's drawn at least 5 targets each of the past 4 weeks. Ryan Griffin has been a fantasy disappointment, but has the right Week 9 matchup in the Colts' bare leather defense. Tyler Higbee is on the streaming radar against the Giants, allowing 2.8 more weekly points to tight ends than any other defense. AJ Derby is averaging 5 targets over his past 4 games. A complicating factor for Week 9 is Brock Osweiler's presence under center. Week 9 kickers rank player name opponent notes 1 Kymie Fairburn vs. 2 Harrison Butker at Doll 3 Will Lutz vs. TB4 Jake Elliott vs. Den 5 Mike Nugent vs. KC6 Matt Prater at GB7 Greg Zuerlein at NYG8 Ryan Succop vs. L9 Justin Tucker at 1010 Blair Walsh vs. Was 11 Matt Bryant at Cart 12 Graham Gano vs. ATL 13 Giorgio Vecchio at Mia 14 Stephen Hauschka at NYJ 15 Nick Rose at C16 Adam Vinatieri at Howe 17 Cody Parkey vs. OK 18 Chandler Catanzaro vs. BUF 19 Patrick Murray at number 20 Mason Crosby vs. DET 21 Robbie Gould vs. ARZ 22 Josh Lambo vs. Sin 23 Randy Bullock at Jack 24 Phil Dawson at SF 25 Brandon McManus at Phi 26 Aldrich Roses vs. LAR Week 9 Defense as Special Teams Rank Player Name Opponent Notes 1 Jaguars Def Spec Team vs. Sin 2 Eagles Def Spec Team vs. Den 3 Texans Def Spec Team vs. Ein 4 Rams Def Spec Team at NYG 5 Bengals Def Spec Team at Jack 6 Bills Def Spec Team at NYJ 7 Saints Def Spec Team vs. TB8 Cardinals Def Spec Team at SF9 Titans Def Spec Team vs. L10 49ers Def Spec Team vs. ARZ 11 Seahawks Def Spec Team vs. Was 12 Lions Def Spec Team at GB 13 Panthers Def Spec Team vs. ATL 14 Giants Def Spec Team vs. LAR 15 Raiders Def Spec Team at Mia 16 Falcons Def Spec Team at Car 17 Broncos Def Spec Team at Phi 18 Ravens Def Spec Team at 10-19 Jets Def Spec Team vs. BUF 20 Dolphins Def Spec Team vs. O 21 Packers Def Spec Team vs. DET 22 Chiefs Def Spec Team at Doll 23 Cowboys Def Spec Team vs. KC 24 Redskins Def Spec Team at C25 Buccaneers Def Spec Team at number 26 Colts Def Spec Team at Howe